Episode 63.
63?
Yeah, I said that to
Wow.
somebody last night. We were talking about the podcast, and I said, yeah, we have a little podcast that we do, and they said, oh, and then I think my daughter said, well, yeah, it was episode 61. And they said, wait, 61? I said, yeah, we're going to start cranking out more too, more frequent, which is a good problem to have.
That's right.
That at times people are asking for them. You know what? And let's start that, because we don't ever give shout outs that much to people who let us know that they either listen or in some cases have a topic for us they'd like for us to discuss, or to tap into some of your biblical knowledge and how do I approach this from a spiritual point of view. And I was just the other day, I love my guys at PDX Wraps. I love that whole shop, guys that do vehicle wraps and all. It's a big shop and it's very successful. And I got to take them some hats, by the way. I told them I would do that. Yeah. And I love going in there, and those guys are like, hey, that one episode was this, or what did that mean by this? And I don't know if these guys are walking with the Lord or or have any kind of faith, and it doesn't matter if they do right now. I just say this is a stepping stone. This is kind of a toe in the water thing. And if that's what it is for you, then that's great. But what did you hear? Was that today?
Yeah.
Border Patrol?
Yep. Yeah. And I just, you hear from different viewers how it's kind of a funny thing. We started this and then, kind of just two dudes saying, hey, let's get this out there. And then we keep hearing such positive feedback. And next thing you know, we're hearing stories. It's not just, hey, great podcast. It's like, hey, man, I want you to know, like, I really, really, your podcast has changed my life. And there's 1,000 podcasts out there, and guys there's great ones out there. We can sit here and rap on some other good podcasts, but it's really encouraging to hear the consistent and growing feedback. And not just from guys saying, hey, man, it's really having an impact, but also the scope of where it's going. It's travel. It has legs to it. And next thing you know, it's like, somebody passed it on to somebody else who passed it on to somebody else. And recently heard that Border Patrol guys down there, it's getting passed out.
That's great.
Passed around down there.
Love you guys.
Yeah. And which is a great opportunity. I know we got lots of guys across different careers, everything, that are listening as investors, stay-at-home dads, educators, guys that are working down at Costco, to guys that are doing Border Patrol, first responders, everybody in between listening. But it's good every once in a while just to kind of do some shout outs. And
I love that.
And say, hey, we just heard a story. And we want to say, yeah. So again, to the Border Patrol, thank you guys for what you're doing. And man, I can't imagine what that's like right now.
No.
And some of the things that we hear and navigating that. Same thing with law enforcement guys, first responders. Putting your lives on the line all the time to go out there and do that. And we know it's not always easy. There's a lot of bureaucracy you guys have to handle with that. And I've heard from some good law enforcement friends who are like, man, sometimes we can't respond to things. Our hands are tied, just dealing with a lot of stuff like that.
Well, and a lot of those guys too, probably, and that's where the podcast can come in, I think, because they're scared to bring up, because I talked about recently a firefighter that I had bumped into. Yeah. And he was like, with firefighting, because I got a bunch of dudes around and I would love to kind of start to share some of the questions I'm having about faith. And he's not, he wasn't a long time every Sunday morning guy. He was just starting to kind of ask the questions about, what am I doing? Am I on the right track? Is there more out there? Why do things feel so weird? Right. And just the questions that a lot of us have. Yeah. And, some of those guys, especially in a place like that, bunch of real men are around, and you're not really sure how to bring up around, eating ribs and drinking beer. And then some guy says, hey, what do you guys think about Jesus? That can be an awkward situation. And I acknowledge that. And so I was talking to some guys, I'm trying to think where this was the other day, and I had thrown out, I said, well, that you just hit on kind of why, another big reason why we thought a podcast would be great, because it could be a tool, and it could be that something you hand to somebody where maybe it's uncomfortable for you to send them scripture or a prayer, or to start asking them deep questions off the jump that may make them uncomfortable. The podcast is kind of, once again, shallow into the pool.
Totally.
If you want to throw it out and say, hey, I liked this. What do you think of it? And if they don't text you back, then they don't. But again, that's one of those things that I would think for some of the guys you're talking about. And then other guys, I've heard as well, guys who spend a lot of time in the car or on the road, who are traveling. And I got to, I don't know him well, but there's a country music guy in Texas, and I won't give his name. And he's gotten huge down there, and I'm a big country music guy, and I've sent him some episodes because I was hearing from a good friend of his that you would think he would have just fellowship around him and guys pressing in and good conversation, but when in reality he doesn't have two friends to rub together, most likely. And I know that is the case with this one in particular. And after coming from a career where I traveled a ton in the NBA with the Blazers, where I was in hotel rooms and whatnot, and everybody used to always say, oh, you guys must hang out on the road all the time and have dinners every night. I'm like, no, never. It just doesn't happen. You're worn out. You can't wait to get to your room, but you're by yourself. You're isolated. So this is another case where I think this too, because I know that this is the way I feel when I listen to podcasts. If I'm driving somewhere, it keeps you company. Yeah. And a lot of times you can feel like you're eavesdropping on a conversation or you're involved in the conversation. And it's, in summer, get on a podcast about UFOs, Bigfoot, whatever. I understand. It's all fun. But there are some things that have a little deeper meaning out there. We hope to provide that. And when we started this, we kind of said the same thing. There are, of course, Christian podcasts out there. I'm not sure there's one that I've heard that much of that is focused largely toward men and what they're struggling with today.
Well, and that's why we're trying to build a relationship with listeners, and because we want to keep speaking to things that are trying to hit the bullseye and taking conversations that we have and going, wow, I'm hearing this consistent theme. You and I both like, man, I'm hearing dudes. This is the conversations. These are the topics that keep coming up. Great. Let's bring that into the podcast so that let's open this wide open and hear from you guys and build that relationship with you. So it means a lot when you come up and grab us and say, hey, I was just listening to the podcast. I was out, scouting while on a hunting trip and was listening to the podcast. And man, that kind of stuff we not hear that. Just heard that today on Sunday and from a good friend. And I was like, man, that means a lot to hear that we're keeping you company when you're in the backwoods and hopefully, stalking some trophy animals out there. But we also, we have an idea. We kick this around, and just to let you guys know, we're working on it still. Hasn't died. We're working on our end, but we're hoping to put together, I don't know what we would call it, but a hangout, fireside hangout barbecue.
For like local guys in the
right.
Northwest who are listeners.
Exactly.
I know there's some outside the area, but yes.
Yeah. So we are still working on that on our end, that we're going to get a time together. We've actually been working on something behind the scenes, creating some QR codes and ways that you guys can reach out to us. We actually build a relationship, a dialogue. You can send us information or conversations and topics. And then we want to host a kind of a fireside barbecue at a friend's house. That's a great property nearby, who just, has offered that, called us up again today and said, hey, use my property. It's amazing space here. And for any viewers, listeners that want to come, invite some guys to come out with you. Let's actually meet in person, have a night together around a fire and some good grub and hang out. And again, it's about building community, and because we know that's what guys are hungry for right now. Yeah,
for sure. And I think about one of the questions, which leads to kind of the topic in this episode, that I was thinking about last night, because I was over in Central Oregon at a concert, and I go to some country concerts, usually a few a summer, but I went over to Tyler Childers, and he's gotten so big now. And I was watching him, and I don't know what it is about. I like music, but I particularly like good lyrics.
Yeah.
Deep lyrics, and he's one of the best. And that's why I like Stapleton. That's why I like a lot of these guys that really go deep in some of their music. I like the shallow stuff too. I mean, party time music's great too, and I like it all. But I was up there, and he was telling a quick story, and he's not a tremendous showman. He's a little uncomfortable. Some guys like Cody Johnson will grab the mic and just preach. and it's fantastic. And then some guys don't like to spend a lot of time talking. Tyler's pretty good, but he's a little awkward. And I can tell it's not his favorite thing to do, but he was talking last night a little about his background, being from Kentucky and having a father who's a coal miner. And then when he was and a lot of these guys, especially in the country world, I think they come from singing at church. So he's got a gospel sound, as you will know. Now he's mainstream, to be sure, but a lot of his music, if you listen to it, and you'll know what I mean if you are a fan at all, he's got a lot of faith in his music and a lot of gospel. And so I was thinking of last night while watching him, having just been in a discussion with somebody, with a friend, about his life and how it's going, and is he in the right place? And how do you recognize what is the perfect plan for your life? And are you following that? And how much do you have to do with that? And so then that split off into a conversation about free will and true love. And we've talked about that before, and the necessity of free will for there to be true love. So then if you apply that a little bit to what I was thinking last night, listening to him kind of be stunned. And I love when guys are humble and acknowledge, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm standing here where I was singing at church, and then I was sleeping in a tent and on a friend's couch, and all of a sudden somebody heard one of my songs, and then next thing I know, I had this break and then another break, and all of a sudden I'm selling out stadiums and arenas all over the country, and I'm like, how did I get here so fast? So then my question last night while sitting there, kind of thinking in my head, not necessarily about VP, although nothing against VP, but I was thinking about, what was his plan? Is this his plan? And was this meant to be? Was this fate? And then do you believe in fate? And if so, how do you believe in fate and free will at the same time? I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but these were my times of just standing, looking, watching a concert, and thinking about all these things in my mind and thinking about his situation. And then going back in my own life. And I got asked a lot. One of the questions I always got asked when I was an NBA television broadcaster for all those years, a lot of people would say, if I'd go speak to a school or I'd go speak to a group before a game, which happened a lot, did you know this is what you always wanted to do?
Yeah.
People would always ask that. In other words, was this the plan all along?
Yeah.
And I'd always say, well, sure. I mean, I wanted to do this. I had a dad who's a coach. I was always into broadcasters. I was always very savvy about the media and had my personal favorites and always paid attention to the call of a game and a production of a broadcast. So yes, but then I think back to moments, and we can all do this, I know, but I think back to, I go to junior college, play baseball for a year, and I go to Oregon State with a plan to play baseball, and I'm a pitcher. My arm starts to fall apart late in my freshman year. All of a sudden, my fastball's gone, and I'm realizing I got nothing now. And I'm realizing going into my sophomore year, I'm likely done. Poked around, surgery, nothing. It's fried. Back in the day, they didn't, I think I've mentioned this before, they didn't keep any really restrictions, not like now, on pitch count. I basically, in layman's terms, I threw my arm out.
Yep. And
could I have come back with some cutting edge rehab? Probably. We didn't have that then. So so then anyway, so I'm at Oregon State, and and there's a reason why I'm bringing this up. I'm at Oregon State, and one night I'm with a buddy, and we're going to get fast food, which is what we always did. And I'm out on 9th Street in Corvallis, and there's a few places we're trying to pick. And finally he says, let's go to the Burger King. So I said, okay. So I go into the Burger King in Corvallis, and I run into a guy who I knew because he umpired a lot of my American Legion games and even high school games. And he says, are you not playing now? And I said, well, my shoulder's gone. I don't know what I'm going to do. I literally don't know what I'm going to do. I probably am signed up for some classes. And at that point, I don't know what major. And I've tried to tell some kids this now. You're going to change your major, and I don't know what's necessary and what's not. I mean, if your major is, North African lesbian interpretive dance. I don't know what to tell you. My major was 6, 7 different things. It was all kinds of crazy stuff I never knew I could apply to the world. So anyway, he says, well, I am, as you know, I work for media relations at Oregon State. Why don't you come work with us? Because he said, I know you. You're into this stuff. I know your dad, and you know, I had mentioned I think I like to write. So, long story short, I worked there my final 3 years in college. That puts me in and around everybody in the media in this area. It was Gary Payton's senior year was my senior year. So all of the games were on TV. I'm working in TV trucks, pulling cable. Let's go back then. I could get way more into this. If I had not chosen Burger King that night.
Right. Exactly.
If I had not walked, and if he had not chosen Burger King that night, Mike Corwin, I love Mike and worked with him for years. And kudos to him. And I don't know if I've ever told him this, that one silly chance meeting.
Yeah.
And there are forks in the road where we can all look back and go, now, I mean, we can all say, yeah, I could have been hit by a bus this morning. Yes, there's those things all over. Every day is that for us. And that's a gift, I think. If I had not had that chance meeting, simply by arriving 5 minutes later or choosing another fast food place to get a burger, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now.
I know.
I wouldn't have had a career in the NBA or in radio prior to that or in college football. Yeah. I would not be here. And that's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. So when guys start talking about a perfect plan the Lord has for me. Yeah. So was that divine? Yeah. Was that meeting divine? Was that supposed to happen? Yeah. Or would I have figured out a way to that career without that meeting? I can tell you no freaking way would that have happened. So, and I was thinking about that earlier today when you told me about the Border Patrol guys, or those guys sitting there going, how did I end up here doing that? I mean, proud of my job, but how did I end up here? And then it was kind of started by me watching Tyler Childers last night and watching him on stage go, how did I end up here? And whose plan was that?
Well, and that, I think you raise up probably one of the most mind exploding concepts, which is, do we have, and does God have this detailed scripted plan for our lives? And because the Bible talks about God has a purpose for our life, he has a plan for our life, that you can see that all over the place.
A perfect plan.
But yeah, and so then you go, because on the one side you go, wow, that gives me so much meaning that God would look at someone like me that I might think I'm insignificant, but in God's big scheme of planning and universal history, I'm a part of something spectacular because God puts that value on me. He puts that purpose on me. And so no one is insignificant. So on the one side of that, it should elicit great value and worth and all of that. And then the other side, it freaks the crap out of you. Yeah. Because then you're going, did I miss it? Is this thing so scripted out with God that if I miss one of those, miscue, misread, I turned left when I should have turned right, does that mean I'm in jeopardy for the rest of my life of missing? Is this thing like a set of dominoes that's so perfectly laid out and just, one choice can push that? And are they all going to fall in the right way or not? And so it can lead to a lot of anxiety on the flip side of that. And I think I had that what the heck moment. This was a handful of years ago when Seth Curry was playing for the Blazers, and Seth would come to chapel. And I've met Steph before because he would come to chapels and stuff too. And
I'd only met Dell because he was the color analyst for Charlotte.
For the Charlotte Hornets.
Right.
Exactly.
So I was around Dell, but I didn't know his kids.
Exactly. And so I'll never forget where I'm like, okay, going into chapels, and Seth would come to chapels. And so I'm like, every year I do a series on relationships, talk about dating, marriage, all that kind of stuff. And I get done with a couple chapels where we're talking about dating, marriage, life. And Seth walks up to me and he goes, hey, I'm getting married this summer. I'm marrying, someone Callie Rivers, who's Doc Rivers' daughter. And he's going, so I'm marrying her, but we need premarital. Would you be willing to do our premarital? And then we need someone to do the wedding. And you fast forward, here I am in Malibu, and I'm in a private limo going to the wedding. And who's the wedding party? Who am I in the limo with?
By the way, if Pastor Mike does ever do your wedding, he requires
a private limo.
And green M&Ms only.
Yeah, exactly. I can see this whole moment in my mind. I'm sitting here going, I got Dale Curry and Sonia. They're sitting here behind me. Then I got Seth Curry and Callie. Steph is sitting to my right, and the whole family.
You're fighting the urge to pull your phone out and start blowing selfies.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly.
I'm posting all this.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, hey, everybody, do you mind? Just everybody, could you cram in a little bit closer? yeah, over here, right here. And I'm sitting in this going, I'm in Malibu Beach on the way to the wedding. We're all in our, getting ready to do everything with our suits on, tuxes, all that kind of stuff. And I just kind of go, why am I here? Why am I here? And there's only thing you can say, and you talk with any other chaplain, they'll tell you the exact same thing. It's so absurd that God's making this really clear right now. You had nothing to do with this. No one can get their way into this. And I love how God sometimes has these moments where he's like, listen, just so you know, I opened these doors, I made these things. So make sure that you don't ever, not even a party for 10 seconds or a second, get to think you had something to do with other than just along the path, being obedient to things that God. Now, you and I just gave some examples of, but then I can flip the script and go, oh, that sounds really cool, but what about the hard stuff that we've gone through in life?
Right.
My dad who's killed in a car accident because he's traveling back from teaching kids at a Bible camp. And you're like, well, was that God's part? Was that part of his plan? Is that part of my life that God wanted me to go through that? And so you can kind of really go back and forth on these things. You got people sitting here going, man, I'm going through the hardest thing. My wife wants to leave me. My kid thinks I'm the, worst parent ever. We got this diagnosis and we're trying to figure out what's next. And you kind of go, well, wait a minute. Is this also part of that plan? Is God's purpose for my life supposed to be these crazy, amazing, snapshots in my life where I have to pinch myself and go, is this too good to be true? Because that's not really the reality. Is God's purpose for our life includes walking through the highs and lows. And so then you go, well, how much of those highs and lows do we really have a role in that? Is this thing just so scripted out? And am I supposed to just, and I get asked this a lot, especially by young leaders, or just young people, like young adults. I just had this conversation the other day in our church with a bunch of young adults that were asking, like, okay, practically speaking, does God have a soulmate, a spouse out there like that's waiting? And then I'm just like, dating life is trying to weed it out, of who. God, do you have the one? And I just haven't met them yet. I'm single. Or
what do you say to that?
I have to go to the Bible and go, is there clear, consistent, not just like pull some weird verse out that you go. So here, real quick, let me just say this.
A blanket general verse.
Oh yeah. Well, and this is a segue. You guys will appreciate this who are listening, because this is how cults get started. When you read the Bible, there are rules. By rules, I mean it's hermeneutics and homiletics. Anyway, these are big words, but really means this.
I don't know what those mean.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter. But I was just talking with a guy recently, and that word came up, and I said it's the rules in which we read the Bible so that we get out of it what God intended for us to get out of it. Because in the same way, best example is like, read something in context. Any of us can take something out of context and make it something you're not. Like, you see that happen all the time in the media right now. They want to smear somebody, and so what do? You pull something, they said it, but it was out of context, and then you recontexted it to fit your narrative. Cults do that. We read the Bible, and the rules we use is something that's called prescriptive versus descriptive. When you read the Bible, there's a lot of times in there where something is descriptive. For instance, I'll give you a really easy one. Bible says Jesus walked on the water. Was that descriptive or prescriptive? Meaning, prescriptive was when God says, go do this thing. Or it's a principle that when you live by it, right? So just because Jesus walked on the water doesn't mean I should walk down to the Willamette River here and just pretend that I can walk on water, right? No, it was describing. The Bible describes all kinds of things that's not intended for me to grab that and then prescribe it as like a guarantee, right? What I mean by that when it comes to like marriage and is there a spouse, is there a soulmate? Is there an example in the Bible where it's not just a story where maybe that God had someone picked for somebody, but is there actually where a thus says God, like, hey, find this person. This is there's not really a verse that says God has a soulmate that's out there. Because think about this, biblically, that could lock you into a lot of paranoia. Like, oh my gosh, is this the one? Is this the one? How do I know if this is the one? And then da-da-da-da. But also, like, now let's just use reasoning, logic. Imagine if that's the case, that God has the one for you. What happens in the sequence of history unfolding, timeline stuff? This is like, now you're getting into sci-fi and you're getting into alternative, realities based on choice. What if God does have the one for you and you decide to not marry that person and you marry somebody else that's not the one? Well, wouldn't that mean that the not the one I married was somebody else's the one, and now I screwed up there? And
chain reaction,
exactly,
anarchy,
exactly. And here we are, thousands of years on the other side of that. So we're all marrying somebody we shouldn't have married because it started way, So
blame somebody.
Exactly, and so that's where I go. The logic and reasoning breaks down, and there's not a verse. Now, I do believe that God can allow people to come into your life that I think God gives us a lot of times more choices. And I think we sometimes think God has like, okay, God, is this should I go to Wendy's today or Burger King? Should I buy the yellow car or the white car? Like,
this is the guardrail example, which I love.
Guardrail.
That makes sense to me.
Exactly. That's what I tell young people is God does give us a guardrail. Live for him. And within living for him, oftentimes he'll tee up opportunities and he will say, you know what? Yeah. If you're living for me and applying my principles, that doesn't mean life's good. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you live to follow God, his principles, his wisdom, his truths, if you apply that to your life, then God will, I really believe, God will position you for different blessings in your life that coincide with choices that you can make. So it increases your better options is what I'm trying to say. And like I'm just, and God also, when we make bad choices, that doesn't mean God's like, well, that's it. I gave you this one shot. You're screwed now. Case in point, there's a story in the Old Testament, pretty amazing story of a woman named Esther. Now, Esther was this woman who, if you ever watched the movie 300, remember 300? Mm-hmm. Man, that movie was, and Xerxes. Yeah. Persian king. Man, that's like, well, that was a reality in the Bible. There was the king of Persia, and come to find out that because the Jewish people, Hebrew people in the Old Testament, would find themselves under bondage to other civilizations, the Babylonian Empire, the Assyrian Empire. Well, the Persians were also who they were under. But sometimes they would have a good king that would protect them even though they were under bondage, but would kind of, then they had some really bad ones that would enslave them. Well, Xerxes in Persia and all these different ones, the story of it goes is that here's Queen Esther, who's Jewish, and the king is smitten with her, and so she has favor with him. Well, this king has someone underneath him that wants to absolutely destroy and genocide the Hebrew people. And her life, she basically plays a role where because of her position of influence, she sets up, calls out this, what was really conspiracy going on behind the scenes of the king's man that was going to genocide and setting this whole thing up. Long story short, she ends up being the savior in the story and prevents that. But there's a verse in the Bible where it says, and a lot of people quote this verse, it's, you go to like Hobby Lobby and it's like on every plaque and everything. And it says that for such a time as this, she was in a position of influence that because of her purpose, she could change the tides between an entire race being genocided or not. And God had given her favor so that she could position and do this. And yet the verse that's right after that says, But if she didn't, she could have said, no, you know what? I'm not going to influence the king. I'm not going to step into this situation. I'm going to choose to be silent, whatever, because of fear. She could have said, I'm not going to say anything because, the cost of her life to advocate and speak on behalf. So the Bible says, for such a time as this, and then right after it says, but if you don't say anything, salvation for my people will come from another house.
Oh.
So meaning this, God's going to accomplish his plan.
Well, that's comforting, actually.
It is very comforting. It's very comforting because basically God was inviting her into the purpose and the plan that God wanted to rescue his people. But she had a choice. And God's like, I'm inviting you into this. And if she's like, but I don't want to, it's going to cost me too much, it's too risky. God's like, okay, you have choice in that. But God says, in the end, I'm going to accomplish my plans. I'll just find somebody else.
That brings up, I was thinking of all kinds of questions while you were talking about this story. And we were talking about guardrails. So for me, when I think about the guardrail principle and coming down a windy road from the mountains and having two good-sized guardrails on each side of the road.
Yeah.
And I have thought about that, and there's certain things that I'll hear and then stick with me, and that one sticks with me as a really good, easy illustration to apply and to think about. So if I think about that as the individual, so my question goes, if I miss one of those opportunities, will the guardrails still provide that I still end up where I'm supposed to be? But your story is a bigger picture of saying maybe it doesn't matter if I get to where I'm going in that because God's plan still gets accomplished, whether or not I'm involved in it or not. Now, selfishly, I would like to be involved in that.
100%. Absolutely. And like right now, I'll give another example because the Bible talks about how God raises up and pulls down kings over nations. Hey, wait a minute. Does that mean Hitler was part of God's plan? I mean, just to play this out, we call this the sovereignty of God, and how much does God control outcomes? How much does God ordain and orchestrate those through human volition and choice? And it's a mystery. Some of it's a mystery, and because it wasn't God's will that Hitler would take power and genocide and the Holocaust. Of course not. God doesn't want that to happen. And so, but you're like, what you just said, Mike, that God raises up kings and so forth. And I would say to that is that God can't create evil. God doesn't do evil. What God does is he creates choice for humanity. And yet God, and this is the mystery part, God says, no matter what they do, in the end, my purpose and plans will be accomplished. Now, again, that's hard for us because we want to control that and we want to understand that and make God explain himself to us. But if God explains himself to us to the extent that I'm like, I fully get God now, then I'm God. And he has to lower himself. God gives us enough to say, you're going to have to trust me with this, and I'll give you enough, but not, I'm not going to over-explain myself to you because there's a point where we're just finite people. So you boil that down to just practical living every single day. Does God want us involved in elections? I would say he does. I think that, and we'll do another podcast on government because there's a whole theology on government. And does God ordain government? Yes, all over the Bible, God wants good government, not corrupt, bad government. He wants a good government to accomplish what governing is supposed to do, which is to steward and care for society, protect society, not exploit their citizens. That's what God wants with government, but we see so many examples where it's the opposite of that. And so here's a picture where then you have candidates and people are going, Mike, do you think it's God's will that it's so-and-so or so-and-so? And people ask me that all the time. And I'm like, well, I can tell you this. At the end of the day, God wants someone who will put into policy and practice what best aligns with his word. And so that when a society comes in alignment with God's word and it governs from God's word, it's accomplishing what God positioned and purposed the point of what government's supposed to be. Now, I know oftentimes we see people where you go, well, what do? It's the lesser of evil. And I understand those things. And you got to go, well, who best aligns? That's really at the end of the day. Or do we just throw our hands up in the air and get really pacifistic or even fatalistic and go, well, you know what? God's going to do what he's going to do. So why do I even need to participate in anything? And you can take that to such an extreme where you go, I don't even pray. I don't engage in anything because this whole thing is just so wound.
Doesn't matter what I do.
Doesn't matter what I do anyways. God's going to accomplish thing. And then we just ultimately get very fatalistic, pacifistic, and do nothing. God invites us into human history to partner with him to accomplish his plans and purposes. And somehow in the mystery is even when man screws it up and goes off the rails with it, somehow God goes, this is all still going to fit in the end what I'm trying to accomplish. And I'm going to play my purpose out. We just have to go, okay, God. So I think at the end of the day, instead of me sitting here going, how do I boil that all down and I can spend all this time on brain energy? What does that mean for me just practically every day? You know, because here's the thing. I've heard a quote that said this, that when men don't fill their lives with purpose, they fill their life with pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many guys are like, man, yeah, I don't have a purpose for my life. I'm just in the grind. I mean, I guess my purpose is paycheck, paying the bills.
And we've talked about how before social media and back in the 40s, 50s, whatever, when there was such a purpose and such a need, there was so much less anxiety and stress because there wasn't idle time to start thinking about other things. You had one job to do.
Yeah.
And it was like that was keeping maybe you on your plan or him on his plan.
Yeah.
But it is crazy when you think about with all the distractions and the temptations toward pleasure, and so many things are automated now, which is why I don't want to go down this road, but which is why it's funny we start talking about AI and robots and everything else doing everything for us. It's like, you really think that idle time is going to be good for us? Have we shown that we're productive and constructive when given a massive amount of idle time?
Absolutely. We had a conversation this morning with some of our staff about those that are going into retirement, and because I've talked with a lot of guys. I just talked with a guy the other day about retirement. And I said, how's that going for you? He goes, it's brutal.
Yeah.
He goes, yeah, in some ways it's freeing. Yes, he's not in the grind and all that. But he goes, I sit around. I don't know what to do with my time. I feel now more depressed. And that's true for women too. But men,
sure,
like God created us to contribute, to create, to steward, lead, do things where we wake up every day and go, man, I'm part of something. And I think that everybody, whether you're a Christian or not, we are created to participate, contribute, to take care of others. In fact, I would say the more self-centered we get, actually, the more anxious we get.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And that's been since my career change in a massive way, when after the 16 playoffs, we were all fired and all of a sudden that part's over. And I've mentioned this so many times in this podcast, but I had to come to a spot where am I going to stay in that, move, uproot everybody and stay being in the NBA. And I had a couple of opportunities, I think. I mean, I know I had at least one. I had others, but I did have one thing that I turned down. Is that what I wanted to do? And at that point, it's just interesting. Everything you're saying here is really interesting about those moments and those ideas and those plans and the choices we make in those moments and how we are discerning enough to realize if we're making the right ones or not.
Yeah.
And when you talk about it being, I hear the cliche a lot about a perfect plan. You always hear the perfect plan. Well, the plan isn't perfect because we're perfect, because how arrogant you'd have to be to believe that. The plan is perfect because God is perfect.
Yep.
And so God has a special plan for each of our lives. We know that. And the reason why I was thinking about this as a topic, as I mentioned before, is I was just thinking about it last night. But there are so many questions that go with this. I know it's a general type topic, but I thought about it and given some specifics really in personal stories in both of our lives with this. It's very applicable to so many people today who I know get to the point where, like I was saying, when I was done, my biggest challenge became, okay, every day when I got up in that last job, I knew what my expectation was. I knew when I went to work, if I wasn't prepared, I was going to look stupid on TV in front of a lot of people. So that was my motivator. So that gave me one plan in my mind, which kept me busy and really kept me out of idle time and kept me focused and pretty good self-esteem at the time. Not a crazy amount, but because I was contributing to something that was very, very tangible with immediate affirmation one way or the other on social media, which started to come to be, when I was halfway through my Blazer broadcasting career. But my biggest struggle since then, since now I've had to reinvent and I'm doing 9 different things and, it's kind of a mixture of, am I doing the right thing? I guess, I don't know. But my biggest struggle comes during, and it's usually, this is funny, and this may be just personal to me. I don't know if anybody else feels this. Early in the week, Monday, Tuesday mornings, if I'm not being productive, a part of something and contributing and making progress, I start to feel really lousy about myself.
Exactly.
I really do. And it's not an anxiety, this is just me. It's not for me, it's not anxiety so much and worry as it is destructive thinking and just feeling worthless.
Yep.
And I know a lot of guys feel that way.
Well, that's where I think we fall into 2 extremes. Because you go back to, like, why did God create us? Well, we're created in the image of God. So then that raises the question, well, who is God? The more I know God, the more I know about myself in many ways. For instance, Bible says in the beginning, God created, and he did it all in 6 days. And God creates because he's a creative God. It's in his character to create things. And so God creates us to create. Now that can look so different from everybody. Putting a spreadsheet together is creative in its own way. Taking chaos like numbers and money, and then you create order out of that.
I'll see guys do that, and it's like so Greek to me, and I'll go, you really got something? And they get done, and they're excited. You got something out of that?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, I can imagine doing that. Anyway,
exactly.
We're also individual in our
And we are. And I said that to
talents.
someone the other day. I was like, man, the way that you put numbers on a spreadsheet and organize things, you don't get a lot of credit for that as being a creative expression. But I go, it is creative. Because what you're doing is you're creating order out of chaos. You've taken something where numbers are all over the place and this and this and this, and you've put a plan, you put a spreadsheet, and all of that you've created. That's creativity. God does that. He's creative. And so, but what did he do on the 7th day was he rested. And he even told that to humanity. In fact, we love our 2-day weekends, but really God's like, work for 6 days and then you rest on the 7th day. And not that we have to be so legalistic and oppressive about that. I don't think God's fine with us doing that. But I think what's happened is we've created a ethos of complacency and comfort. And so what happens is, on the one side, one extreme is, when I don't do something that's contributing, like if you're young and you don't have a job, you kind of feel miserable. That's how I tell young men, and it's true of young women, but if they're young dudes, like, get a job. Back in the day, we had paper routes. Man, when I was 14, I got a paper route. Man, I thought I owned the world. Getting up, and it kind of sucked, getting up early at 5 o'clock in the morning. And
it wasn't necessarily the money as you're talking about.
Totally.
Now I understand, yes, kids like at that age, you start to learn that work results in money, but it's the purpose part of it. It's the
purpose. I remember speaking of worst job I ever had. This is a legit story. People go, what? And they go, that's like watching a scene out of Napoleon Dynamite. So I'm a high schooler. We had just moved from LA to Canada. So I'm on a student visa. I can't go get a job. And I did some jobs under the table, which were illegal, but hey, whatever. And, painting fences and, different stuff. Because high school kid, I needed some pocket change.
Is this a security guard story?
Oh, no, but that comes later.
Okay, I got to hear that one.
Gosh, the security did that
at the motel.
Oh, my gosh. I've never seen... That opened my eyes. The hotel life is crazy.
At a cheap motel, a security guard.
Oh, it was...
Can you imagine a worse job?
I could tell you hundreds of stories. Crazy. We'll do a whole thing on that, man. I will get to one of those, 2 of those stories, man. Stuff that goes down at hotels is just.
I was down in Albany. I'll let you go finish. I was down in Albany the other day, and I'm doing a commercial for an RV down there, and right next to it is this motel, and it And a couple doors were open and people were laying down in front. And I said, that motel has seen some stuff.
Seen some stuff.
If that could talk. Because you could just see and just cars on blocks and people. And I thought, man, and you got to be a security. Anyway, finish your story.
It was a great job.
I love
for
your security
getting through college and working at nights, man.
Flashlight.
Oh my, yeah, mag light, man, walking around.
Thinking your special forces.
Dude, I had a badge. Security badge, man. I'd shine that, polish it up, walk around, mall cop, man.
Oh man.
Paul Blart, that was me, man, walking around. Dude,
anyway, I totally ruined your story.
No, that's why we do these.
I know. I thought you were going to the security guard thing, and I got excited.
You just brought back so many good memories.
Good ones.
My gosh, I remember. Okay, real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Man, they would call me to do everything. I'm the security, but sometimes it's like 2:00 in the morning. Hey, these towels need to be delivered to room 401. Like, fine, okay, I'll deliver towels and stuff. But I remember, like, man, they'd be like, hey, Mike, we need you to escort this prostitute back to her car. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, walk up to room 301. She's standing in the hall. I'm like, hey, can I walk you back to your car? And incredible opportunity to talk about Jesus, by the way, which I did do. Yeah, I remember one time looking at a lady and I said, is this what you grew up idolized? Is this like your goal in life? Is this what you want to do?
Your plan?
Yeah, I did. I remember asking one, I felt sorry for her. I said, is this, I just saw the look on her face afterwards. I was like, you know what? I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to talk to her about Jesus. And I said, hey, is this what you want for your life? Because I think you have more value than this.
Wow.
And she was like, what? And I'm literally walking to her car in the parking lot. And I just said, yeah, I just think, hey, I think God created you for something more than this. And I said, is this what you're wanting to get out of your life? You know what she told me? She goes, I'm a single mom. I can't make more money than what I do right now. And that's why I was like, dang, I felt it felt sad for her. And then there was weird stuff going on. I mean, just people, there's so much hanky-panky stuff. One time, though, I had to walk around the back of the hotel with a flashlight. You just got to do your rounds.
Did you get a walkie-talkie? Or
I had a radio.
Oh, you did?
Man, I think I was like, I had pepper spray, mace.
Who was on the other end of the walkie-talkie, or did you just carry it for looks?
The overweight manager behind the counter up front that wouldn't get out of his lazy
asleep.
butt out. Yeah, he's like, you go take care of this. I don't need to do. Could get out of the chair.
What's he going to do about
exactly.
it? He's knee deep into an episode of Jugs magazine. He's not coming to help you. You're on your own.
I'm on. Yeah, there's no backup. There's a backup. He's
I love.
He's got a bag of Doritos and a big gulp, and
I could paint the picture of this motel and the manager.
It's so seedy.
And you walking around all
check
green.
This out. I come around the corner when it's like 3:00 in the morning, and it's like you do these routines, and it's boring. And then one night you're like, "There's a dude in a dumpster." I'm not making this up. I am not making this story. I come around the back, and the first thing I'm like, "Who's this dude in the dumpster?" Going through the dumpsters, I'm like, "A homeless dude? Like, what's going on?" And I get up there, the guy's wearing nice clothes, and there's 4 guys standing around the dumpster. They're facing the dumpster back towards me, watching a guy in the dumpster at the hotel property in the back, like where it's dark. And I'm like, what is going on, man? I walk up and I have this flashlight and I'm like, can I help you guys? Which is probably looking back going, not maybe the smartest move.
You're going to join that guy in the dumpster if you're not careful.
I think I was getting ready to be, yeah. Well, as soon as I say, can I help you? The 4 guys that had their back to me turn around and all I see is guns.
Oh.
And I see their guns on their waist.
Did you take your mag light out?
Oh, I had my bag. I'm like, freeze, freeze, suckers.
Let me see some hands.
Get your hands up.
So what was the story? What was the guy doing in the dumpster?
Okay, so I all of a sudden dudes turn around and I see these guns on their hips and I'm like, oh, and a dude, and they pulled out their badge. They were with the Treasury Department. Come to find out, this guy was a known counterfeiter. They were on a foot chase through the night. He ran through the hotel property and dumped a bunch of counterfeit money in that dumpster. And they busted him. And they said, now you're going to go back and jump in there and pull all that out that you threw in there.
Whoa.
So they were arresting him for counterfeit. And he was pulling the bills out of the dumpster that he tried to get rid of.
Did you get a little bit of credit for the collar?
I was like, hey, can I get a couple of those?
Yeah, get a couple of those and then get a little credit in the paper.
I'm a struggling college student. Can you hook a guy up?
Get your mugshot in the paper as you assisted with the arrest?
I got no assist.
Okay.
I got nothing on that.
You had their backs, though.
Yeah, I had them. Me, my Maglite. I got 1,000 more of those stories.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I completely drove us off.
I caught a pedophile one time.
Wow.
Who was picking up a kid, and now he got arrested, and I felt good. I got the assist on that one.
Attaboy.
Oh, yeah. I was like, I grabbed him. I'm like, where are you going?
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I walked in and this kid comes running up to me and says, that guy. And I was like, what guy is he talking about? This was like in the pool area where they got video games. That guy. And so I like, what guy? And this kid, he's like probably 8, 9, 10 years old somewhere. And he goes, that guy's trying to take me. And he's asking me to do stuff. So no joke. I come around the corner. I see this like guy by himself, middle-aged dude. I'm like, what's this dude doing back here? And I walked up to him and said, hey, what are you doing back here? No joke. I'm not making this up. He looks at me and goes, you got me.
That was easy.
Yep. I said, come with me. I grabbed him by the arm and said, you're coming with me. I grabbed him by the arm. I took him out. I held him, what they called detained, whatever. They didn't give me handcuffs,
did you have
man.
zip ties?
No, I had nothing. So I literally like
a couple of zip ties, you'd have been fine.
Yeah, I should have hog tied it was what I should have done.
Yeah.
That would have worked.
And then throw him in the pool.
Some rope.
Which would have been fine with me.
I was going to take him to the train station is what I was going to do.
Absolutely.
And then I called the police and I said, hey, can you come? And they came and ran. This guy had been warrants out for other things that he had done that had to do with pedophilia. And they hauled his butt to jail. And, I felt good about that one.
Absolutely. You should get a reward or something.
A little assist on that one. Yeah.
Anyway, what was the job you were getting to before I said?
So the job I had, I'm a high school kid. I technically am not supposed to work because I don't have a work visa, but I had a student visa. And they said, hey, you can work on the campus of the school. So I go, okay. So I go in and I asked the school, do you got any jobs? They said, yeah, we got a janitorial job. We can give you got to clean bathrooms. So I'm like, all right. $1 an hour. I was paid $1 an hour. That was it. $1 an hour.
Tax free?
No. Well, technically, yes. Depending on how I answer that one.
Statute of limitations,
exactly.
long run out.
Exactly. Depending on what you claim, what you don't claim, and all that. Pay me $1 an hour, and this is how cheap they were. And this is just legit stuff. I had to go clean. Now, anybody that's done janitor work in men's restrooms knows there's the hockey pucks in the urinals.
Sure.
So what happens is when those things are done, you
had
throw
to fish
them away.
them out?
Man, they were so cheap. They told me, get your gloves on, fish those out, go rinse them off, and put them back.
You got to reuse them.
$1 an hour. I'm rinsing dudes' hair off these things because you know what they all look like in the urinal, right?
Oh,
I'm rinsing those off for $1 an hour. But I say that because here, the reason I say that is, even though that was disgusting, demoralizing, inhuman treatment, $1 an hour, doing that, I went home going, I got a job.
Yeah. You made a difference.
I felt a sense of pride. Like I got a job. I'm doing something. And, and when that paycheck came, that was, a few bills at the end of a week or something like that. And I go spend it on, candy at the local, whatever, or I'd save up to buy a pair of sneakers. I earned that money. And I felt this, man, the joy of like, man, I took a long time to save up for that pair of sneakers or whatever it was. It put a different value on appreciation for what things cost, hard work ethic, and it was character building. Somebody told me, I've shared that story, and they said, and I remember like talking with God as a high school kid going, God, this sucks. I remember like going, this sucks, man. I'm in here cleaning pubes off these hockey pucks.
Yeah, man.
And I'm getting paid. Yeah, you're like, yes.
Been there.
Been there, man. I got you. And I remember complaining with God going, and I remember God said, I remember clearly, he said, these are building times for you. These are building times. I remember hearing God tell me that as a young man going, okay, God. And I would, have these conversations with God. And I just think that's, you have a generation now that I want the job with the perks that normally used to take someone 10 years to earn, right? And now you got people going, I want this out of the gate. I want all the PTOs. I want all the paid vacations without having to put the time in. All I'm saying is that entitlement can keep you from your purpose because you're holding out for something you think you deserve instead of taking something that might prepare you for something you deserve. And where I go with that is this, and there's a story, and this is just this will help you with purpose, because this is a question I get asked by a lot of guys that I really want to give some encouragement on this. One of my favorite stories is David.
I was going to bring up Mr. King David a little while ago. Go ahead.
So King David, he's King David. Dude rules the empire. He's got the kingdom. destroyed Goliath, goes down in history as the man that took out the giant. A lot of notoriety around that. His story didn't start like that. And here was a guy where, and this is the best story, I think, to make the point, is that God says, I got a king. And because the people wanted a king. It wasn't really God's, but they wanted a king. And so God goes, all right, I'll give you a king. I got a guy. And sends a prophet to go to the village where David's at. And God says, because in that village, there's a man that I want you to anoint. And anointing back then was God's way of saying, this guy's been chosen for the job, right? Anoint him with oil. So this prophet goes and says, hey, God's got a king here. And they bring out the best of the best. Line them all up. Because in their eyes, they're going, well, it's got to be this, and this guy. I mean, this guy's stout, tall, athletic, strong. They actually describe the group of brothers was the best of the best brothers, right? And God looks at the prophet and says, none of these guys. None of these guys. And it's a classic verse where it says, man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And God knew that there was this David, young brother that had the crummy job of taking care of the sheep in the pasture. That's the equivalent of him having the yearning job.
Mm-hmm.
That was the equivalent of him out there, wasn't fair, whatever. And God tells the prophet, that's the one. That's the one. Wait, not the one everybody else is looking at? No, not him. The least of these, the runt, that guy. He's out in the field. He's not vying for top notch of anything. That guy. Why did God pick that guy? Because he knew his heart. He knew his heart. And God said, that's the guy I want for the job. Now, as the story goes, this is where it gets really good, is that now they're under attack, the Philistines, and Goliath shows up on the scene. And it says that when Goliath showed up, he struck fear in the hearts of all the men, right? So every dude in the kingdom, the top warriors, was afraid of Goliath. And then the word comes to David that he's got to go fight Goliath, right? And what's interesting is when David hears it, this is what David says. David says, well, God was faithful, giving me victory to beat the bear and the lion as I was watching over the sheep. If God was faithful to give me victory over the bears and the lions, God's going to give me victory over this. So, and as we know the story, he did, chopped his head off, beats Goliath, all that. Becomes the king later. The point of it is that God was preparing David. And that's why I've told people, God prepares us for the things he's prepared for us. So sometimes we're in a season, it sucks, and we go, how is this part of God's purpose?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes God's purpose is not what I do, but who I'm becoming. We focus as men so much on what I do, instead of who am I? Who am I becoming? A better way of saying it is my being is sometimes more important than my doing. And God was preparing David for the next promotion he was going to get. We want the promotion with all the perks. And God's like, in fact, if God blessed you with the promotion and the perks, you might not have the character to hold that down. It might actually ruin you. And we see that with people who get too much success too fast.
Completely.
They don't have the character to hold that. And now that success ruins them. So God may be holding out on you because he says, in this season right now, it's actually better for you.
And you don't know what would become of you.
Exactly.
If all of those,
Exactly.
and I do the same thing. I sit there and pray for business success and for this check to come through. And then I have to stop and think, maybe that's not good for me. Maybe that isn't the right thing. Maybe this isn't the right time. And it's hard to do that. And I get some eyes will roll in that. But if you tell yourself that, at least it centers you. At least it brings you back to.
That's right.
It's not, I can control what I can control. And maybe there's a part of this as I'm angry at times going, what are we, come on. I mean, how long do I have to wait? As in a couple of the things I'm involved with are. And it's like, well, maybe, and I sent that to one of my business partners the other, when was that? We always do this, but I gotta find this text that I sent. I think it was, hold on. No, all right. So this is from a devotional. I sent this to my partner this morning. Although God does want us to have a good life, there will be times when we must be patient and endure not getting our way. These disappointments test our character and our level of spiritual maturity, they actually show whether or not we are truly ready for promotion. Isn't that good?
That's
I just literally
right
sent
there.
that this morning at 7:45.
That's money. Exactly. That's it right there. That's why I think it's more important. Like if we're asking, like, okay, what's God's purpose for my life? There are times when God will say, I am opening a door for you and you can jump through it. Great. There's other times when God says, you can pick and I'll bless whatever. And then there's times when God says, in this season, I'm preparing you for the promotions or whatever the next thing that we don't feel is happening the way we want and the timing that we want. And I think, so then purpose is less, what do I do, but who am I becoming? And in every season, there's always the challenge of character shaping and forming and all that. But that's why we sometimes have to look at it from like, okay, in this season, what is the hardship shaping in me?
And there are two verses that I think hit this for me. Paul says in Philippians, and this is a very short one, that God saved us and started a good work in us. So that goes back to
totally
David and how that whole thing and what I just talked about, how it developed. And then another one that I love that you have used even when you have been in sermons before, and actually one time, I don't know, a few years ago at church in one of your sermons, you had people pull a verse out of a basket.
Oh yeah.
It might apply for you.
Yeah.
And that was this one for me, Ephesians 2:10, that we are God's workmanship.
Yeah.
So you combine those two in that he saved us and started a good work in us, combined with we are his workmanship.
Yeah.
Simple, I know. But when you have that, a little bit of anxiousness as far as not knowing and not feeling like you are enough, and you start to worry about it, you think about those verses, concentrate, meditate on those. I think it helps.
Oh, it always does. It totally does. It's interesting because it's funny. Like right now, you know, I look at those verses like that. We are his workmanship, meaning his craftsmanship. He's shaping us to accomplish his purposes. I think of like how that ties in well with the other story of in the Old Testament, Joseph. And here was a guy that did nothing wrong. You know, father loved him. He's great. Ends up in slavery. While he's in slavery, which was unfair, unjust, all that, he ends up getting a position of honor. Why? Because he had the character for it. And then he gets a promotion there while he's in slavery, but it gave him a much better job of influence, even within that situation. And then his boss's wife lures him, seduces him.
Yeah.
And totally innocent. What does he do? He leaves, he flees because he's not going to sleep with his boss's wife because he's a man of character, but he left his jacket, and then she uses that to basically slander him that he committed, you know, this sexual deviance, and she misrepresents him, and then he ends up going to jail for it. Super unfair. But while he was there, he then gets positioned to be the cupbearer to the king. So he gets even more influence.
Start to see the plan play out.
Exactly. And then he becomes a ruler. In the end of the story, you know, everybody knows the famous verse, what the enemy meant for bad, God means for good. And so you see that unravel is that somehow God gives us choice and he invites us. And sometimes those choices work out great and sometimes they don't. And somehow we go through seasons of like, why is this? Am I in God's plan? Am I in God's purpose? This doesn't seem, because if you equate being in God's purpose with everything good, then you will misdiagnose God's purpose for your life over and over and over again. It's the wrong equation.
It's our measuring stick, and it's a worldly one.
Exactly.
I fall victim to it all the time.
All the time. And then we go, we beat ourselves up like, oh, God's punishing me. And it's because I'm not doing the right thing. And then you're like, now you're in this abusive relationship with God
and with yourself.
And exactly, you beat yourself up. That's why I call it abusive metaphorically, because we beat ourselves down over and over. I'm so undeserving. That's why I'm going through this. And God's disappointed with me and all these sort of things. When actually, God might actually in this season be preparing you for a greater promotion and blessing. You're misdiagnosing the whole thing. Now, sometimes we do make bad choices. There's consequences from that. I get that. But even in the consequences, God's not done with us. And he's like, hey, I'm going to use this for good in your life. Did you screw up? Sure. Did you make a bad choice? Sure. Fine. I'm going to use it. I was just with some dudes that down in a juvie detention center in Vegas, and one of the guys had done jail time, and now he's out speaking to kids in juvie, helping them find purpose and faith in God. And
that's a purpose.
God redeems all that stuff. So no matter, that's the cool thing is, no matter when I go off the rails, speaking of guardrails, no matter what I do, yes, there can be consequences, but in the hands of God, given those consequences, he'll still remold it and recycle it for his purpose in your life. So at the end of the day, no one is ever written off. God doesn't ever write us off and go, I'm done with you. He can take a humble heart that says, God, use all my mistakes, use everything. God's like, yeah, just give it to me. He's so good at recycling. God is so good at reshaping things. And again, what the enemy means for bad and what we have done for bad, you turn your back and you say, God, use my life, use everything, and he'll repurpose that for what he wants. He's not done with anybody. And that should always give us a sense of hope, encouragement, and purpose for our lives.
I love it. That was a lot of personal tales. I hope that was okay. And I like we're trying to lay a groundwork for authenticity here, if you didn't get that. Not that we planned it this episode, but I got fired and Pastor Mike used to shine urinal cakes. So there you go. That's Vertical Pursuit, baby. We'll see you next time. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.